I'm born and raised in Bangalore, which makes me 100% Bangalorean. If I have to reflect back on times that I started my initial journey, I was busy drawing on the walls of my home from age 4. I distinctly remember the floor had a cherry color, red oxide color that extended all the way to the walls and covered 1/3 of it. You don't see those homes anymore, red oxide homes that actually covered 1/3 of it. And that became my canvas, a place where I could really bring my imagination to life. Sketches that I could really try upon and not be worried about how people judged it. Just spontaneous creations that would, spark off imagination. Incidentally, my subjects was mostly gods and goddesses that adorned our walls. From time to time, I brought superhero characters like the He-Man. I don't know if people come from those eras. The giant robots, and also mythological characters like Ramayana and Mahabharata actually were practice areas for me to really bring these characters to life. I did this with simple chalk, which was all meant that I could easily rub it off and start all over again, which was wonderful. You weren't married to anything at that time. I was fortunate that my parents did not stop me at that time. I'm here today in front of you, and I'm so proud I still draw on the walls. But I have also added other things like drawing on canvas, drawing using digital paper or tools and other mediums, but nothing much has changed. I still draw on walls, which is the biggest canvas that you can really work. The best part of childhood is that you're spontaneous, you're energetic, you are not really bound by what people would think of your creations. You are a lot more visual and very imaginative, which I think as you grow up, we start to lose because of various thoughts and biases that govern us in terms of how we are judged as designers and artists. At school, we had periods that was mostly time to relax, which was all about art. Though we had a dedicated time that we had for art, we never had a dedicated permanent art teacher who taught us art. So many times I was called up to draw on the board just to keep the students entertained and engaged so that they don't create nuisance. And I took this as an opportunity to bring my creations that I actually had, which was trying out at home, these characters at home, onto the platform, adding my own imagination and improvisation. By the end of school, I was sure I wanted to pursue art as my highest values. Back in those days, pursuing art was not a very lucrative career option at that time. However, I was sure that was the only thing I was good at, whatever was the outcome. I was fortunate enough that my parents believed in it wholeheartedly and followed me all the way through. At college, as a part of our art curriculum, we were supposed to submit 30 or 40 drawings every single day that would help us through in terms of honing our skills in imagination, in training our hand-eye coordination, as well as drawing from life. Everything that we saw, everything around us, from lampposts to people to dogs to cats to cows to objects that were immovable were objects of our imagination, and we had to draw them. These were some of my sketches initially that I was trying to draw. These are all my friends, people who were taking a nap in the park, who were reading newspapers. These were amazing then that we never understood why we were asked to draw. We looked at it as a task basically. We weren't sure how we will apply this on our everyday life. Will this be useful? We looked at it as a task and not as something that we would use this on our daily life. Right from pushcarts, as I said, all of them were subjects for us to really look at. I was also exposed to some great artists who I consider genius, where I drew inspiration from. Some of the great artists like Cezanne, Mona, Matisse, Van Gogh, K.K. Hebar, Amrita Shergill and Bhattacharjee were some of my favorites, and I still consider them and admire them as my favorites because their art or their work ended up light years ahead from where they started. The best part about these great masters that I realized is their pursuit for love, their passion and determination for their craft. And I strive to follow in these examples of total commitment towards my work. Art and design for me is not just a building block, but a way of life by now. Because the only way I could express myself and make sense of the world around me. What I've picked up from these great masters during my formative years are three key aspects that I'm really going to talk about through my slides, through my works. If you look at the term genius, and I think all of us have a ways and words to explain what genius is, other than passion, grit, commitment, there's so much more to it. Specifically, if I have to look at it from an art student or a designer standpoint, it's about looking versus seeing. What we realized is that we're taught in art schools when you start, you place an object in front of you, you measure it, you start to draw exactly what is in front of you, which is nothing but you're just looking what's there and you're documenting what's in front of you. The point of seeing is to really observe what's going on in front of you. And most times that comes by just taking a step back and realizing that there is more to it than what you see. Our environment, specifically if you are in a crowded city like Bangalore, there's a lot more chaos, there's a lot more things happening. And when you start to look for inspiration, there's so much chaos, and what we are really not taught in art schools, or it happens to you at a later point, is that how do you start to see what you are looking for in a crowded environment? And I think that's the key takeaway from these geniuses who I think knew exactly what they were looking for, even if it, despite being a crowded space they were coming from. Finding the extraordinary in the ordinary, literally. I mean, essentially, even an ugly piece can be made beautiful, and how do you actually make that happen? These are some of my sketches. I was fortunate to be a part of this sketching club. We meet up every Sunday in Bangalore, and the idea was that we were a bunch of friends who wanted to sit together and draw and just document parts of Bangalore. When I start to look around, there are areas of interest, and how do you take what's in front of you and document it and push it to a level where you're just not documenting it, but you are bringing in personality into what you do. These are some of the sketches. This is Cantonment Railway Station. This is our library. My thought and my idea was that how do I not just document, but also add certain personality. So for me, it was also working with time. It was just not about using drawing as a medium. The way I look at how I can communicate is that the idea is just not using visuals as a medium, but can you actually also use typography and communication that can go along very well to actually enhance what you're trying to say, which can take you back to that time where you were, what happened, and also adds more aesthetic sense to actually put this together. Idea was to not just train, but also look at certain details. What are certain things that came to me naturally? How can you really bring back those textures and details that you see and document them as close to possible? It could also mean mundane kind of activity, like the store in Jayanagar, which was like a 3x3 where this guy could sit down and just move. He wouldn't even stand up. He would sit down, he would just turn around and pick up stuff and make sure that there are 15 other guys who are standing in front of the store, and he would just dish out everyone. It's almost like multitasking. And it has been wonderful, that extension of other things that just opened up, so that it is not like you're waiting on me. You can go ahead, help yourself on things, and it's a wonderful play in terms of how people went about living their lives. I kept going to Delhi from work, so opportunities to actually go and draw certain things. Delhi, for that matter, has some of the best monuments and cultural heritage that I can see, and the more I see, the more I want to stay and work over there. But I think I love Bangalore more than Delhi. Anything and everything that just made more creative sense to train yourself to understand the study of light and shadow. Most times I didn't think of it as I want to create this. It's just this simple idea of, hey, you know what, how do I capture this light and shadow? It's spontaneity. It's also about being at the moment because things are changing very rapidly. How do you document this and you have a certain time period for it? It's not like a typical artwork where you have a lot of time to really sit down and create. And as much detail as possible. This is Creative. I think this was a challenge that I took upon myself. I was like, I want to get to every little detail that was there, right from the hoardings to billboards. It's actually when you look at chaos and if you could really capture that in a beautiful way, it's possible. The second thing, from my own experience that I've seen, is this opportunity in limitation. If you look at the great masters, their style was almost limiting because they had a certain style. But if you really looked at how they actually brought this together, they picked and chose certain elements, certain subjects, certain color palette, so that they could really bring life to it. Because if you look at it, if I have abundance, you don't know where to start. Right? A canvas is a great limitation. A medium is a great limitation. If you remember what Michelangelo once said, he was asked a question, how do you really bring this to life? He was like, I don't see it, I don't bring it to life, I see the stone and it actually speaks to me. I see a form already, I just chisel it out and it's almost there. So it is almost like a limitation in terms of what you could do. And most times you think limitation and creativity doesn't go together. Right? I mean, this is the wrong place to look at it. I mean, if you have to be creative, you can't be limited. But I think if you really embrace limitation, there's a lot you can do. My thought is that you need to start at first being limited to be limitless, which I came across as a very good quote, and I think it's stuck to me ever since. This is a project that came about with the quintessential pushcars, the superheroes of our streets. They are at every nook and corner of our cities in India, and you can't miss them. They are superheroes because they actually fulfill a basic need, a household need for a lot of Indians who are on the street. Right? It's almost like the social service that I'm hungry, I need to catch a bite, I'm right there. You don't necessarily need to walk so far away. I want to buy right from colorful flowers to fresh vegetables to snack, whatever you can think of, they arrive right in front of you, of your home. And it's amazing what they do to how we approach our day-to-day lives and how they solve some of our problems. For me, the limitation was, how do I take something like this and document them? Because most times, if you really look at where they are, it's a lot of crowded spaces that they have. A lot more colorful backgrounds that they passed around, including their own cars being so colorful, so they pretty much merge away in that sense. It was actually an accident. So this is Gangama, who's this guy's wife. She runs this car. This is at Old Airport Road, where I used to work previously. We would go there very often to this lady's car, and generally we would chat. And one fine day, I was just chatting with her, and she was in this business for the last 15 years. While all of us really look at career options and say, hey, you know what, I'm not growing, I'm not doing anything, where do I go? All this is happening. And this lady is so happy in this 10 by 10 car that can just like barely fit her. And she's so happy doing whatever she's doing. Right? In a way, it's a limitation for her in the way she looks at her thing, but she's turned that into an opportunity that can easily benefit her. So what I did was, I wanted to really capture what this would mean, and this is my first edition of Gangama. my thought was, do I put the person in front? Because the moment I put people, right, we are trained to look at people. Like pictures, so much of pictures that we typically tend to directly look at people and not what can be metaphorically them, which actually sparked the entire series for me. Because I had such great acquaintance with a lot of people who I would, stop by and say hello, right from my childhood days. This was Hanuman Tappa, who's been around for the last 15 years, who's just selling tender coconuts with a big smile. You speak to him, he's always smiling. It is amazing to see what kind of lives that they have. They've found the limitation and they're really thriving in that limitation and to turn that around to an opportunity that they could use. This is Murugan, a sugarcane vendor. How do I take some of these and bring elements of what celebrates them without them in the picture? This is Sinappa. He was one of the charming guys because all women would run to him because he was selling bangles, right? So again, a very graceful guy, always had a big smile. How could I take that and make my own in terms of the story? Other cards, colorful cards, everything that I could think of that came to me naturally. This was the series. Again, going back to limitation, if I looked at it as a limitation, I couldn't have really come to an approach that was very minimal, that took away certain details. Yet, when you looked at it closely, there were enough details. If you really look at how everything is made of, right? I mean, even like how the million colors are stemmed from 3 basic colors. Music stems from 12 notes, right? So it's very important to really go back to the basics and say, hey, what if I have to really start with only so many numbers? Can I do justice to them? And that just brings out a different way to how you would approach it and creatively sparks ideas that you never ever thought would happen. The last one that I want to cover is context and identity. I think it's the most important thing, at least from an Indian context. There's a lot that you see on the web from artists and designers who do a great job documenting their surroundings, bringing about almost like documenting their day-to-day life, their present, their past, and how can we as artists have a purview or a view into our own surroundings, and how can we get inspired by our surroundings and use that as a way to explain or document it and make it interesting. This is a project that is very dear to me. I went to Hampi as a student. I then moved away from drawing and painting for the longest time, which just happened after I was away for 8 years not doing any drawing or art, and I realized I was missing a piece of what I enjoyed. I moved and lived abroad for a while. One thing I realized that what you see is that it could be the most simplest plug card, including a sewage lid. Everything had a certain identity. They celebrated every piece of everything that they had. And here we had some beautiful heritage that was hidden away behind big, massive hoardings, crowded environments, and we did nothing. If you actually walked into them, you had inscriptions written all over it without really understanding that there was a piece of heritage and history that we knew. And my thought here was that how can I do something to Hampi? Because every time I went there, and whoever my friends were, you would end up buying junk jewelry or silverware as souvenirs to take back home. And this is a personal project that I thought I wanted to do something about it. And that's how it came along that, it took me at least a couple of years to come to what I was planning to do, and I wasn't sure how to approach it. What I kept doing was taking pictures and also trying to draw them. And if you look at it, there's enough drawings and paintings that people have made of. What is my personality? How do I bring something that is so unique to what Hampi can help me bring about? And these were like the initial set of drawings that I was trying to make. Also trying to study, can I really capture these ideas in a lot more greater detail. Typography was another area of interest. How can I bring type as well as my visuals together? Again, starting off with limitation. What I did was to really pick up colors from the landscapes and photography that I'd done and started to work on them. This is almost work in progress. How I would put them together and bring them all together. And finally, this is the series that I put together. Again, more perspectives in terms of play of light and shadow, which was what I was really after. It's about like internalizing that story. Sometimes what happens is that there's so much of inspiration and ideas all around you. It's about some of them stick, some of them don't. But if something sticks, that means there's an opportunity. Can you revisit it? Can you spend more time behind it and work with it? And I think one of the things that I've learned from the geniuses is that every bit of what they do, right from Van Gogh to Matisse, was all about just documenting everyday lives of peasants. And they use that in a great way to show pain, to show hard work. Even though we don't belong to those cultures, when you see it, you know how much of work went behind it. And can we use that as a great medium for us to explain our culture, our areas of interest, and make it as relevant to the younger generation as possible. Sometimes we really spend a lot of time really putting a lot of weightage to how we feel, how we think, what we should get paid. But I think if you take away all that, I think this, according to me, sums up. If you really have this urge to do something, it's about just the task is its own reward. And sometimes when you don't really think too much, when you are in this entire idea of just doing it, things start to fall in place. You start to make these connections. And it's not about force, it's not about appreciation or putting this on social media and getting a lot of praises that will happen over time. But it's about investing in just doing the act, to just be in the moment and just use that as a great time to engage and inspire.